Are you haunted by the thoughts that show up at 3 a.m.? Good. This is where we follow them, where science meets ritual, humor meets reckoning, and aging and identity are viewed as evolution. And where we ask the only question that matters. How do we craft a life that can hold what emerges? Candles optional, curiosity required. Ghosts welcome. I'm your host, Julia Bernacchi, and this is AGECRAFT After Dark. Before we begin this episode, a quick confession. AGECRAFT After Dark is produced entirely by me. I book the guests, write the questions, record the interviews, edit the audio, write the show notes, upload the episodes because, apparently I looked at a perfectly unreasonable amount of work and thought, what if I did it all myself? So, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with a friend. It helps more people find the podcast, keeps this little labor of love growing, and reassures me that I'm not spending my evenings talking into the digital equivalent of an abandoned lighthouse. Oh, thank you for listening. Now let's get into it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, theys and thems. Welcome to the show. If there is one thing that keeps me up at night, it's my own mortality. Not necessarily death itself. In fact, I'd like to believe that when we die, we simply move on to another plane of consciousness, another chapter in a story that's bigger than the one we're currently living. Instead, it's the reality of living long enough to lose the people that I love. Because if we're lucky enough to age, loss is part of the deal. It's right there in the fine print of existence, tucked between your knees will eventually make weird noises and you will suddenly care about throw pillows. Now, as I get older, mortality feels less like an abstract concept and more like a neighbor I occasionally see across the street. Not at my door yet, but close enough that I know we'll eventually have to meet. And I find myself wondering less about what happens when I die and more about how resilient I'll be when the people around me do. How do we survive grief? How do we care for one another through illness, dementia, addiction, cancer, aging, and all the other chapters of being human that we'd rather pretend won't happen to us? Most of us would rather organize our junk drawer than talk about death. And honestly, the junk drawer is probably less emotionally taxing. I get it. Which is why I'm so glad to have today's guest on the show. For Grey Liefer, the natural arc of existence has always been impossible to ignore. For years, they found themselves witnessing, studying, and holding space as loved ones navigated illness, dementia, addiction, suicide, cancer, old age, and death. After more than 20 years in the fashion industry and decades spent immersed in meditation, therapy, Eastern medicine, and a deeply committed spiritual practice, Grey arrived at a crossroads. And instead of turning away from life's hardest conversations, they turned toward them. Today, Grey helps people navigate some of the most profound transitions we'll ever face, bringing compassion, wisdom, and a rare willingness to sit with the realities most of us spend a lifetime trying to avoid. In this conversation, we talk about grief, mortality, meaning, and how contemplating death can actually help us live more fully. But we also get into something equally important and significantly less sexy: the practical, administrative work of dying. The wills, advance directives, paperwork, passwords, end-of-life wishes, and all the other things nobody wants to deal with until they're standing in a hospital hallway wishing they had. Death may be inevitable, but leaving your loved ones with a filing cabinet full of mystery documents doesn't have to be. So light a candle, grab a notebook, and maybe make a list of where you hid your important papers. Welcome to the circle. Let's talk to Grey. Hi, Grey. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm going to dive right into this because we have so much to cover and so much to talk about. Gray, please state your name, your pronouns, your age, and what's keeping you up at night.
Mhm. My name is Grey Liefer, and I am they, he, she, kind of anything as long as it's respectful. And I'm 56 years old. I just turned 56 last week, so
Happy belated.
thank you. Um, yeah, I what is keeping me up? I have this thing. I'm in this groove of thinking about what it means to be an apex predator, and the fact that humans, there is no creature on Earth that does not identify and recognize us as apex predators.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because now we're kind of at this point with technology and creation and all these other things where we are only predators by choice. And I think about that all the time.
That's some deep shit, Gray. This might be my favorite answer thus far on AgeCraft After Dark. Yeah, I mean, yes, as you said that, and I was thinking about that yes, this is a choice. We have a lot of choices, and I think sometimes we make the bad one a lot. And I never thought of it in that context. And thank you for bringing that to top of mind because I'm probably going to think about that tonight, and it's going to keep me up. So thank you for passing it on. Appreciate that.
I do what I can.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, where are you right now in the liminal space of aging and identity? And to kind of clarify, that can be kind of, if anything feels like it's ending or beginning or even emerging.
Well, it's interesting, I I came to my gender understanding so late in my life that and that really took me into sort of the dawn of a new era that I feel like I'm just getting started with everything in a certain way. Every decade gets better. I'm happier. I'm more comfortable in my skin. I absolutely love my life. It's like I'm really looking for. I was thinking about this the other day because it was my birthday, and I was thinking about, wow, I really am excited to see what 65 is, what 75 is. If I'm lucky, what 85 is. Like I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Yeah, the more I do this show, the more I get this kind of feedback, and I think it's so positive. And I am so happy that people are having this experience because I think in the culture we hear a lot of negativity around aging, and I guess it's just I guess it's just the circles that I hang out with. But there's a lot of positivity going on in my circles. In the pre-show, you and I were just talking about my trip to Mexico City with this huge group of friends. And we were all, in our late 40s, early 50s. And everyone's kind of in this wonderful place of either embracing and loving their life or also kind of transitioning into new things. And I love and support the idea of finding and experiencing new things at this age and constantly investigating what the hell we're doing here and evolving because I don't think we ever quite arrive. And to be with a huge group of that, I thought, what a privilege that we're all going to get to hopefully do this together. If we're lucky enough to live long enough, I get to see who the hell you're going to become in 10 years. Like it could be anybody.
Yeah. I love being at the age where I've had friends for so long that we know like all these different iterations of each other, and we can go back and like jokingly we'll like call each other out of certain different past eras of ourselves and be like, and just even casually I was texting with a friend of mine about, she was saying that a restaurant that we loved for so many years in Manhattan is closing, and she's like, dude, you got married there once. I was like, yeah. And my third time I got married was there. She goes, that was to a total train wreck, but that party was great. And I was like, yeah, it was an awesome party.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of it's just so comfortable and it's so nice to feel seen and also just well, I would say seen, understood, and giving grace for like all these past interesting things that you might have done that maybe not that I would know what that feels like, of maybe, feeling a little judgment of your past and just feeling like all of this grace with the people that you love and a similar experience. Cause I'm going to talk about me again, in Mexico City, back to that story. I was really feeling my neurodivergence in a moment. We were out getting some tacos and all of you that are listening and were there, this is for you. Uh, I had ordered a Michelita, and it was not what I thought it was going to be. And my executive function was low. I had hit a wall. I was also getting my period, which I'm in menopause. I'm not supposed to get it, but I knew in that moment it was coming. And I was like, how dare you spoil my trip by interrupting with all of the mood swings and all this stuff. And it was all, And I went to just kind of pour the Corona into this glass, and I was angry about it. And as I did it, I just was letting it pour, and it all just overflowed. It was a moment, just overflowed all over the table. And everyone just like let me have the moment. And nobody was like, what the fuck? Everybody was just like, yeah, okay, you're doing that. Right on, and then like we all got past it and it was fine. And it was sadly, or maybe not, it's kind of like part of my personality. And I'm like, this is just who I am. And nobody got pissy about it. And yeah, so yes to all of that. Being seen, being called out when you need to be, and then also being given grace in these moments, which yeah, okay. All those that are listening who were there, that was for you again. Yeah.
Well, what is it they always say? Like, it's not a party until something gets spilled. So
I was spilling big time. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to dive into the heavy stuff right out the gate because this episode is going to be interesting. You lost your mother as a toddler.
yes,
You were adopted and weren't told the truth until age 12. And I think you were adopted by your grandparents. Is that correct?
my great aunt and uncle.
Your great aunt and uncle. That's what it is. Now, how did that early experience of hidden loss shape the way you approach death and dying with your clients today?
It's interesting. I do think that it informs a lot of my foundational thinking
Mm.
about death. Um, there is what it gave me was this incredible gift because, I think when the worst happens, right, for a little kid, I think the worst thing that they can't imagine it because you're too little, but um when we look and we project that onto a toddler, it's like the worst thing we can think of is, oh, all of a sudden out of nowhere they lose their parents, right? And but the gift from that is that once that happens, it means that the whole entire world and all the rules are different,
Mm.
and you get to create something different. I got to have the privilege of knowing very early and having this sense my whole life that no one is going to come and save me. I have to save me. I am the one who ultimately takes care of me and makes me feel safe and makes me feel okay and is there for me. And the thing about that is I truly believe that even though it was a hard way to learn that and receive that, because I started working on that so early, it got me to this point probably sooner maybe than I would have otherwise, of being in abundance with that sensation and being able to give it away all the time, because I have that in incredible abundance. And that is really a core thing of being with my clients, especially with people in dementia, is that sense of safety, because I have that energetically always inside of me. And when they're just not even verbal anymore and primarily just working on energy, right? Because we kind of in dementia, we go back to almost baby stage a lot of the time of it being pure energy exchange. That safety, that sense of safety is transferable. And I use it all the time with
Mm.
clients. And it makes them immediately feel safe, even if they're in a situation where their mind is not sure where they are or who I am or what my name is. I can touch their hand, or I can touch, like connect with them in this way. And they're like, oh, I know who you are. And you're safe. You're a safe person. This is okay.
Yeah, I think it sounds like you had to get really comfortable with that, all of that emotion and all of those feelings at such an early stage that I'm not surprised that you emanate that kind of safety. And I mean, I can feel that with you now. So I'm not surprised again that the people you work with, your clients or whomever, are definitely getting that. And we talk a lot about the felt sense of safety on this show a lot and what that does to the nervous system. And I agree with you. I think it can definitely be communicated through touch, through energy, and it's not all verbal. And it really takes a special person to do that. I'm just glad you're here, and I'm so excited to talk to you more about all of this good stuff. Now, what people may not know, and it's very interesting, sort of thing that happened. Speaking of emerging and reinvention and doing things later in life, after 20 plus years in fashion, you were at, I think, Net-a-Port, Intermix, co-founding Playout. What was the actual moment or crossroads that made you say, I'm going to like not do fashion anymore. I'm going to be a death doula?
Well, it was interesting because I had joked for years before that with my friends. I'd had interest in being an end of life doula, and I used to joke, and when I had my startup, I would say, well, if this thing goes tits up, I'm going to be a death doula full time. And my friends were like, you have to, man. Like that is, if this doesn't go, like that is what you should do. And that was kind of the running joke. Even with my then business partner, I was like, I would joke about it all the time. And then when I got to this position where we had come to this crossroads about sort of how to move forward, and we had, taken the amount of pummeling post pandemic that we were going to take, and it was like, what are we doing here? Like, is this even doable? And having this realization that from my perspective, I was ready to end it, and she was not. And so I said, well, then I'm gonna go and do this other thing. And yeah, I sat with it for about a month after that. I just wanted to make no decisions, and I just wanted to sit there and be calm because it was such a huge transition to leave that business that I had been, you know, I had spent 6 years, 14-hour days, sometimes, 100-hour weeks working on this. And it was such a huge part of my being at that point that I just sat still for like a whole month. And I made that decision, and it was so clear. And then I enrolled in a training, this amazing training. And before it was even done, I had clients. Before the training was even finished, I had clients, and I had income from it. And it was like the universe was waiting for me to make the decision. It was like, great, you finally caught up. Now let's do this.
Mm. It makes me think there's a book called, it's by Gay Hendricks. And now I've already forgotten the name of it. Doesn't matter. I'll put it in the show notes. But he speaks of the zone of genius versus the zone of excellence. And these zones are kind of these things that we can all function in. And we can thrive in our zone of excellence. And I mean, I feel like when I was working in real estate and finance, I was in my zone of excellence. Was I happy? Not particularly, but when you enter your zone of genius, when you're truly working in alignment with where you need to be and what you need to be doing, everything clears and everything comes to you. So I'm not surprised by that you're saying that you were already booking clients before it was even happening. Because you're probably in your zone of genius. That's what I think. Yeah. So yeah, recommended book. I'll figure out the name later and get that in the show notes to all of you that are listening. So I assume it sounds like your friends that were very supportive, and they probably were not necessarily surprised. They weren't like, oh, they're having a crisis. They were like, no, this tracks.
Yeah, they were like, all right, let's, the I tend to be um I tend to be pretty precise. Like when I think a lot, right? I'll think on something. People will think I do things really fast, but I've been thinking about how to do it or how I want to do it for years. So when I actually pull the trigger, it goes pretty quickly. And they're like, how did you pull this out of nowhere? It's like, no, I didn't. I have notebooks assigned to this. I have drawings. I've spent countless hours thinking about this in my mind, and I now it all came together, and like this is the way that I want to execute this. So there's a lot going on under the hood all the time.
I relate to that. I feel seen by that. I think, it's like the people who don't know you very well, I think they're surprised, but the people who really know you, they're like, yeah, you've been contemplating for this a while, and this is not very surprising. And huzzah, like, good for you. Let's see where this goes. Yeah, I'm definitely of the same mind where there's a lot going under the hood, going on under the hood. Now, you talk about active mourning and say that time and safety are the two hardest things to come by in our culture. And this leads very much back to what we were talking about earlier. What does active mourning mean? And what does that actually look like?
I mean, it's to me, it is actually being able to process the loss, to start to accept it into your neural pathways, to start to actually accept it in your body, in your nervous system, in your cells. The mind is always maps everything. That's how we can walk around in the dark and not trip on anything. And then if somebody leaves something where you're not expecting it, you might hit it, because your brain has mapped all that and it's pretty confident over, with enough repetition that it's got it down. Um, but I think our bodies, and our minds and our nervous system do the same thing with people that we have an expectation of being there, right? It's like, well, I have 40 million imprints that this person is here. So you saying they're not here anymore doesn't really compute. Like, I don't buy it. Your brain is like, I don't know if I accept this as truth. And that's a really hard part of grieving. And mourning really, to me kind of moves into this space of going through the long and, fluctuating process of actually experiencing the loss and what that means and how it feels in your body and being overcome by it at times, and being able to sit with that and actually move through it.
Yeah, I was reading something, this was a few months ago, that I think it was the person who invented, and forgive me, I don't remember who invented like the stages of grief or had written about that, basically came out and said, yeah, that's all bullshit. It's really not correct. And it's a fun idea, but there's no map for grief. And it is very, it's nonlinear and the stages don't necessarily go in that order. And that's not the whole story. And from personal experience, I agree with that. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, it definitely doesn't go in that order.
No.
It's all over the place and depends on the day and what comes up. When I work with clients, I've read so many books uh, in this topic and about my field that sometimes the information in them I can't remember which one it came from. But there was this amazing piece of advice. I think it's from the book Bearing the Unbearable. Um, and the author, she and I immediately started employing this with people after I read it. She has two scales. She has them estimate their feelings on their grief scale of 1 through 10, and then their coping scale separately
Hmm.
as a 1 through 10, because those are very different things. And you could have a grief day that's only like a 3, but if your coping is a 1 or a 0, it is going to feel like a crisis moment for you. Whereas if you are grieving at of 6, but your coping is at a 9, you're going to have a much better day, and you're actually going to be able to sit with and move through what comes up for you that day, especially if it's like a family thing where you're going to get triggered, or like it's good to know what your coping is that day, because then you can set yourself up for more success. You can know, okay, my nervous system is probably not going to do as great with this, so maybe I beef up these other things that help me move through this, or I ask a friend or someone that's coming with me to, that I can give them a high sign to get me out of here, or like, help me go
Safe word.
outside. Yeah, safe word. All these things that people can do to assist when they're having a moment of when they're in a deep wave of grief. But to me, that separating the coping scale from the grieving scale, genius.
I agree. I mean, this is sort of life changing for me in this moment because I think that applies in so many different ways and not just with grief, our coping mechanism versus whatever is going on. I mean, we're grieving every day. I'm grieving so many things about this country, as a matter of fact. And my coping skills sometimes are much better. And I mean, we can all relate to this. I go through my day, I glance at the news, but I can cope. And then there are days I glance at the news and I don't want to get out of bed. So that's a great example of grief and coping, I think, in the moment. Yeah, this is kind of life changing. I'm gonna sit with that, bring that into my practice as well with my clients, my family. Now you work with people who are LGBTQ plus, and you've built an entire career because Play Out Apparel, that was before your doula practice, was definitely in that world as well. And this is all around visibility and inclusion. Now, are there specific end of life concerns or vulnerabilities that queer and trans people face that the mainstream care system isn't equipped for?
Well, if you would like to extend this podcast to 4 hours, I can tell you what those are.
Yes, I can imagine. I can imagine. But with the time that we have,
Yes, I mean there are a host of them. Some of but honestly, a lot of the biggest ones are legal, and um, it also makes it more challenging because it depends on what city and state you're in.
hmm,
Every state has different laws, different rules, and different family laws. Um, so many situations where I've heard just the saddest stories of um, you know, trans people passing who, the body actually goes to their family who they've been estranged from, and they, maybe this is a masculine presenting person, and for the funeral they negate what they wanted to have of cremation, and they put them in a dress and makeup and put them in a casket and decide they're going to like end this person's time here, their physical time here, in a way that is not honoring them. And many things like this happen, and it's so heartbreaking to hear, which is why I always really recommend, have your paperwork in order, even if you're
mm,
not ill, even if there is nothing going on, like have an understanding of what you want to see happen and do it in a way that's legally binding for whatever state or region you're in or country you're in. um, the everything is sort of up for grabs. There's a lot of things that already were given that are now being threatened, and there's active groups trying to take away all of the rights. I mean, let alone from queer people, like from women in
oh,
general.
yeah.
They're after everything, right? So it very much is the time to make sure that you actually are doing your due diligence, and that if you have any type of legal arrangement, or you own property together, say you're not married, legally married, but you own property together, all of these things, um, and in your advanced directives of making it very clear, and in your Molster Pulse forms, like this is a person I want in the room. You can
Excuse
also
me. What is a what? A Molster who?
most or pulsed forms are like, it depends on what state you're in, but it's basically like a physician ordered, um, it's like a more legally binding than advanced directives, because your
Ah,
your doctor fills it out with you and approves it, like they sign it, and their office keeps a copy of it and you keep a copy of it. But it's much more legally binding, and in that, you can talk to your doctor about who you want to have in that room. um, all of these things are things that there are ways to make it ironclad if anything does happen to you. And it's better to do that when everything is fine than when you're in a hospital room and dipping in and out of consciousness and something's going on, or you've had an accident, or even just the trauma of having a catastrophic diagnosis or a prognosis. It's like the last thing you kind of want to do is the paperwork part. That is for the sober mind to do.
yeah.
So
Yes.
do it when you are not having any kind of issues, and that way when you get to that point, or if it comes to that point or something happens, you're not having to stress yourself with stuff like that. You literally can think about your body and your sense of self and what you want to do with your time here, and who you want to see, and what you want that room to look like, and how you can create your best death. Like those are much better things to be thinking about.
Yeah. And I think, the whole reason we're having this conversation is because I think that the conversation of death and dying is so stigmatized, and it's getting a little better, I feel, these days because we have people like you in the culture doing the good work. But even, I would say my aunt and uncle who passed away separately, I think, within the past 5 years, who were in their 60s, had no paperwork, had nothing telling us what they wanted to do. And I was so shocked that it was not taken care of. but they're of a certain generation. They're not that this is, maybe it does or it doesn't, but they're Lutheran. So there's like a lot of things going on there, or they were Lutheran. Whereas I feel like with my husband, I feel like with my friends, we have all had conversations, and I agree. And I think it's very obvious that it's important to have these conversations, even if they're hard and scary. But like you said, it's better to do it now when you can maybe even laugh about it a little and make really good decisions and, plan for it, rather than when you are stressed and under duress or not in your right mind. To have that stuff done ahead of time is really, really important. So that's a good reminder and a great piece of advice for our listeners. Also, you can file a living will online.
Mhm.
And the hardest part is printing it and taking it to a bank and getting it notarized. So, let's all stop making excuses about that. Let's all stop making excuses. Now, you also, switching gears a little bit, have a program for animals facing end of life and their people. And when I read this, I just about, I don't know, fell on the floor, because where were you last year when I needed you when my dog passed away?
Oh.
But this is, something that's very, very close to my heart. Now, what prompted that, and what does that work actually involve when it comes to people and their animals?
Well, what prompted it was that I've been present for a lot of animals being put down in my life, and wonderful beloved pets, and um you know there's nothing harder. It's just like, it's so hard. It's like, it, there's something about that particular energy, and they're it's a creature that's just been of service their entire life to you. So it's just a very special energy, and they only work in energy because you can't say words to them. You can't
Yeah.
comfort them with, you can only comfort them with your energy. And so to me, there's just something, all life is sacred, but there's something different about the sacredness of the relationship with animals. And because they are just completely in our hands. Like, it's all up to us to create the best possible transition that they can have. So to me, it just made sense. And when I started doing this work, I started having people close to me ask about animals, or would you come and do, and I do body work and energy work and stuff. And they would be like, could you come do some healing, some energy work with my animal? And of course, I'm like, yeah, sure. And, because the principle is the same, right? It's the same as working with people. And it's similar to working with babies because they're
Mm.
all energy. That's what they're reading, and interpreting. But it just made total sense to me. It's like, oh yeah, of course I would work with animals if I'm gonna, this. And I've always wanted to do equine hospice and all this other stuff.
Oh, yes.
So to me, it made total sense. It was very easy to start thinking and sitting in meditation on, what do I want that protocol to look like? How is it different than working with humans? And are there uh, other aspects? And really quickly, it came to me like, oh, wait a minute, I have to deal with their people.
Yeah,
It's
they're
like,
definitely
I'm
part of
not.
the equation. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I'm not, the animal part is the way straightforward part. It's the unhinged owner
I
that
relate. Yes.
becomes like a very different part of it. And it's not that people don't have that, um but there is, I think, because animals connect with us in a way that um is not the same as the way we connect with other humans. That part, um it's like our most innocent self. Our most
Yes.
innocent part of our deepest core self is what connects with animals. And so it becomes so intensely fragile when they are threatened, and when we know they're leaving us, that it's almost like our most innocent, vulnerable part becomes uh deeply threatened. And I totally
Hmm.
get that, right?
Yeah.
Energetically, it makes total sense. But what it means is you have a lot of owners who are losing their shit
Yeah. Been
when,
there.
and this animal is doing their best to like, and they end up holding the space for the person as well. You know, the animal is like holding the space for their
Yeah.
owner and also trying to hold the space for themselves. And I'm trying to hold space for the animal. It's just like, you know what I mean? It's really can get intense. And so I go into that and I just go, I'm just going to take all the energy right on down. And so I just try to work with the owner first. And I'm working, you know, the animal's like, great, thanks. Like, can
Yeah.
we just take it all down a little bit? And get everybody to sort of, you know, the best baseline that we can before I even start doing that work. So the first thing I do is work with humans and then I work with the animals.
So smart. And again, it was unexpected when I read that, but I was so grateful to read it. So I can call you when I go through this the next time because, like many pet owners, you lose one and then you move on to the next one because you have to keep your heart open despite the fact you feel like you could never do it again. We continue to do it because we love torture and we just keep on going. But I do think it is so important and so necessary. Yeah, I just remember thinking I knew it was going to be hard, but nothing prepared me, I guess. Nothing prepares you. But yeah, here I am. Two dogs. Two. I had two before. One died. I have two again. Energy work. Moving away from animals so that I don't cry. Moving on to energy work. You offer energy work and grief release as part of your practice. Now, for listeners who might be a little, skeptical, what is that and what have you seen it do for people who are dying or grieving?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with being skeptical. I was incredibly skeptical for a long, long time. And, you know, I say stuff almost every day that, you know, previous versions of me would roll my eyes back in my head if I heard myself say that then. So that is fair. Like you know it when you know it. Like once you get into a thing and you know you see things differently, you can't unsee it, so it just
Yeah.
becomes your gnosis, and then you're like, oh well, now I have to be that person. Great, you know that people are going to roll their eyes and be like, oh
Yes.
boy, oh
Yeah.
boy. But here we are. It is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so it can look many different ways. I do lots of work with people who like survivor's guilt is a big one. A lot of people who have really like all loss is catastrophic, but when I say catastrophic loss, I mean they've lost their siblings, their parents, everyone, like you know, maybe five people in a span of 5 years of just like their nervous system being attacked by loss and grief, to the point where it's like you can't rebound, like you can't get back up from that in between. And so there has to be something, you know, other ways to help. There's many techniques for grounding that are great and simple, and they've become way more available. Grounding mats are good, but there's this company that make these grounding sheets that work the best, I've found.
Mm.
And they're sheets that are you'll see in them they're threaded with silver, with actual silver threads in them, and you plug them in, and you're not plugging them into electricity, you're plugging them into the grounding hole that is there, that's the balance of all of our electrical plugs, because you can't have electricity safely without having the grounding mechanism. So
Yeah.
all you're plugging into is the grounding, and it moves through the sheet. And it actually, when I have people come into my space and lay down on the mat with that, you know, I've had people that come in crying. They're, you know, they're in that state when you cry and you know your energy is really tight and you're in constriction, and have them be asleep in 20 minutes.
That's incredible.
It's nuts. And energy work, you know, it takes many shapes and forms. For me, I have a very particular frequencies that I work in my own energy, and so it's really about my energy setting the tone for the space. I may put my hand on someone's foot to ground them. I might actually, you know, hold someone's hand. um uh but essentially it's like a current that I create, and that is through my work of my own work that I have done in it's many, many hours of meditation and, different, uh, herbal and plant medicines and all kinds of things in helping to teach me do that over the years. But basically it's a frequency.
Yeah.
And when you can maintain, when you can create and maintain and hold that frequency in abundance so that someone else can actually receive it for a long extended period of time, it definitely helps their baseline. It can really take them down to a place of really quieting their nervous system, helping them get to a place where they, everything feels more doable and more functional, for the next while. And, sometimes they carry that for days. Sometimes it might be that, they carry that for weeks, but, usually people are in an acute state where they'll take whatever amount of time they can have with that, because
Yeah.
the normal is way above what it should be. Like they start their day at like a 6,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the anxiety scale, and it just gets worse from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, I always call it the way I refer to my nervous system when I'm feeling very ungrounded is I feel like I'm lit up like a Christmas tree. It's how I always call it because that's how I see, like in my mind's eye, I just see everything is like on fire, just kind of lit up with light, not the good kind of light. And finding, just in regular life, finding a way to find that sense of grounding, however that might be. I mean, you're providing energy work, but I think it's so important to have some kind of modality that you work with in your private life, in your everyday life, to keep you grounded, because again, we're all dealing with all of this stuff in the world, and I'm constantly feeling lit up like a Christmas tree. And whether it's the sheets with the silver in it, that might be the thing. It might be some kind of a weighted blanket, I don't know, or maybe it's a ritual that you engage in, or just something. I think the whole world at this moment could use a lot more of grounding to help with that. Now, with your energy work, I know that you bring this into dementia care, and I was really fascinated when I read on your website that you talked about this earlier, just in this episode, but you specialize also in dementia care, and you said the defining characteristic of dementia is that uncertainty, and you've talked about providing safety, and that it's often more taxing on the caregiver than on the patient. You also use improvisation as a tool. Now, I used to be a performer, so I find this fascinating, of course. Now, how does improv help someone care for a person with dementia?
It is my secret weapon. It is such a
Mm,
good tool to use for this, to think about it in that capacity, because you can bring energetically, it automatically creates a sense of play.
mm,
But you're talking, if you're having a conversation with someone who, say you're having a conversation with someone and that you're sitting in Brooklyn, but they think they're in Michigan. It's summertime, but they are talking about the snow outside. And, there's no point when someone is in dementia of arguing with them or trying to correct them or trying to bring them back to this, state of consciousness, because they are not here anymore. They don't have the capacity to hold that.
yeah.
And so all you're really doing is shaming them in some way, and that's what they're feeling, is they're receiving like shame and pain and frustration and impatience, and nobody likes those things aimed at them. Nobody wants to have that
Mm-mm.
energy coming at you. So if improv is how I like to help, and talk with other doulas and caregivers about looking at it from that perspective, because you're really just going to go on a journey with them. You're going to go on a dialogue with them, and it doesn't if the client says it's snowing, I say, oh, do you like the snow? And they'll talk to me about the snow. And then they might say, my cousin's coming over for lunch, and their cousin, has been dead for 3 years or whatever. And you say, oh, what are you going to serve for them? Are you going to have, what would you like if they get here? What do you want to talk to them about? What's been on your mind? And there's all these ways to do it, that the more you start really finessing it, and it gets more nuanced, you can guide them into actually talking deeply about what they're actually feeling, that
Mm,
this thing is leading them to think about, because they're just getting these broad scale markers of their memory is coming through. and then you can figure out what it actually brings up for them emotionally. Like you can kind of guide it, and in this, but in a fun way and a non-threatening way, and in a way that they're just having a conversation, and then they feel witnessed because you're meeting them right where they are. You're not trying to change what their perception of reality is. You're just going along with their perception of reality, and not in a way where you do it begrudgingly. It's like, no, this is actually fun. There's nothing that ties me. We don't have to insist that this is Brooklyn. No one cares. It does not matter in this
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
We could be on Mars. Just enjoy the ride, because this person is trying to express themselves. They're thinking about Michigan for a reason, because maybe they used to be there as a kid. Maybe they are having a memory or something is coming up for them about being there in winter. And I'm going to sit there and try to investigate what's at the root of this thought. Not, you shouldn't say that because you're not in Michigan. But
Mm-hmm.
I think people get so scared that they'll lose their own sense of reality or their own connection to the linear principle when they're around
Interesting.
people like that for so long and for extended periods of time, that they start to really dig their heels in and kind of cling to it, and can get really agitated with their loved ones who are in dementia. And so this is just an easy and very accessible tool for training yourself to just go for the ride. Just go for the ride. It doesn't matter.
What an interesting thing too, because the caregiver is working very hard. This is
Mm-hmm.
very tough on the people that are taking care of people with dementia. And my parents are not experiencing that. I feel very fortunate. At least, hopefully, it'll stay that way. There's nothing that's certain. But I have a friend who's really going through it right now, and she's doing the best she can. But I can understand how that can get frustrating. But I also see the value in following the thread and doing what we call the yes and principle from improv, where you just follow it where it goes, and how that can also be engaging, and how you could potentially also learn something maybe you didn't know about this person because they're following this thread that is important to them, and there's something underneath there that's happening. So that's incredible advice, I think, for our listeners to hear. That could be extremely, extremely helpful. Now, where did you get that? Where did that come from? Like the improv kind of stuff? Is there some connection in your background to performance, or how did you discover that?
Um, no, not myself personally, but I uh I don't know how I made that connection. It was like, I think I was thinking about it from when I used to like play act with my kids.
Yeah.
We would just like, we'd play bank. We used to play bank a lot, or we would play, something else. Uh and when I was a kid, I played bank teller. That was one of my favorite things to play. I don't know why I was so into it. And I had this babysitter, Julie, man, the amount of hours she played bank teller with me, God love this woman. She deserves many, many good things in life. But I kind of equated it to being around kiddos where um, you are, you know, I think the difference is with kids, sometimes when you're in play, you also have opportunities to teach them something. So
Mm.
instead of going the teaching route, what was something that I could think of that was akin to just going along for the ride and letting them lead. And I was like, oh, it's kind of like improv. Like it's like and I've gone and watched improv, which I think is great. And my partner is a stand-up comic, and a lot of that is improv and
Oh,
crowd work. And
yeah. So then
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and so I was like, yeah, that's what it is. It's actually improvisation, and then that's when I started really thinking about that when I am helping other people in their caregiving techniques. And caregiving, I want to just say this before we move on, is
Yeah.
caring for someone in dementia is excruciating. There's no two ways about it. It is one of the hardest things that people might have to do, and most of the time it is much harder on the people around that person than on that person, because they are in a different state of consciousness where they're doing their processing, and they're getting their house in order, even if it doesn't seem like they are. Like
Yeah.
everyone is doing that when they're preparing to leave. Um but um the fatigue and the sadness and the pre-grief that comes with that symptom of whatever disease it is attached to, um it it decimates caregivers. And, you're
Yeah.
talking about years and years of this. Um, so I think that I feel like, we're just starting to get more and more discussion about this with every year. There's more and more people who are getting diagnosed. We need an army of people who are doing that type of caregiving. And so for me, I'm constantly trying to come up with different angles, different techniques to use, and different ways for caregivers to fortify themselves
Yeah.
so that they can do this for the long haul, because it is no small feat, and it usually takes over people's entire lives and their families. And someone has to quit work usually to care for people, and so it affects everybody financially across the board. The ripple effect is insane. It's insane.
Yeah. And the lack of, I don't know, support and infrastructure in this country. There's no help, for you
Oh yeah.
going through this and just bankrupting people. It's tearing people's families apart. It's just full circle back to, this country. Here we are. But yes, all of that. And again, I, have a friend really going through it, and I'm, seeing it in real time. And I think, like you mentioned, it's, it's typically not a short experience. It can be very prolonged and go on for a very long time. And that's incredibly, incredibly difficult. Now, we are approaching the end of this interview. Before we get into all the fun questions that I ask everyone at the end of every interview, if you could give one piece of advice to a person going through grief, what would that one piece of advice be?
Just one piece.
I know it's a tough one, just one.
Yeah,
There are
it is.
many.
It
Yeah.
is. Well, it's a tough one too, because grief is so customized, and
Yes.
I feel like my answer would be different for every person who asked me, based on what their sort of circumstances were and who they are
Fair.
as people energetically. But that said, um I think the biggest thing is, if you, and this sounds weird, but uh if really calling on two things, which is to set down judgment and to strive for neutrality,
Mm.
not to strive for feeling better, just go for neutrality.
Say
Like,
a little bit more about that.
well, yeah,
Neutrality.
neutrality is it is really a magical space to be able to go in and out of at will. Um, I find that, it's a big ask. If someone is really in the depths of despair, even the mere notion of being like, well, I want you to feel better, I want you to feel good, or why, what can we do to make you happy, is almost patronizing, and can make people ragey, because they're like, you don't seem to understand how far away from that I am right now,
Yeah.
like that. You're talking about
Yes.
the actual impossible is what you're saying to me right now.
And the antithesis of what I am experiencing in this moment. It is so on the
Yeah.
other fucking side of the universe.
Yeah,
Yes.
it may as well not exist
Yeah.
from where that person is. But neutrality can be right around the corner. Depending on where they are, it's like, if you can get into a state of, instead of maybe wanting to dip into dissociation, or to, there's healthier ways of self-soothing and unhealthy ways of self-soothing, and maybe instead of
100%.
going to an unhealthy way of self-soothing, try to look for those things that just bring you an instant of neutrality. It doesn't have to be that it makes you feel good. It's like, don't even worry about good. Just find something that's neutral, that gets you into this zone where you are not actively miserable.
Yeah. That is great advice. And again, learning so much in this episode. And I feel like that's a great ask for people going through many things other than grief. But that idea of neutrality is fantastic. And I appreciate that advice. And I'm going to use that. And everyone out there, you should use it as well, because it's good. And here we are. This is where I ask you to tell us a spooky story. Now, it can be a literal haunting, Or it can be, a moment of kismet or eerie coincidence. But I have a feeling you've got a good one for us today, and I'm really excited to hear it. Probably several, but we only have time for one, so let's go for it. I'm excited.
So a house that I moved into with my parents when I was, I think it was like 11 or 12 when we moved there. And it was a lovely, lovely home. It was like the guy who built it died there on moving in day.
Oh,
He
geez.
literally built this house and he had a heart attack upstairs in the master bedroom on the day he moved in and he died.
Bummer.
And yeah, and it got sold to another family and then it got sold to us. And the upstairs area, so my parents kind of rearranged stuff around and they didn't have that room and I had ended up with that room. And there was like a these doors that went out onto this little balcony and were kind of over near the front of the house in the driveway. And so as I got older there and I was a teenager, I used to leave the house at late night hours and go out those doors and climb down and I would flee up the driveway into the night and meet my friends. And I had plenty of times when it's like I had a pocket door for the
Uh-huh.
bathroom, and the
Uh-huh.
pocket door seemed to not necessarily be where I thought I left it a lot of the time. And I thought that
Hmm.
was really interesting, but I kind of didn't think too much about it. And once in a while, I would come into my room and there would be lights on that I did not think that I had left on. And I thought, oh, my mom has to stay out of my room. She's coming to my room again, like, and I was like, oh, I can't, and one night I left and I went my friends, and I mean, I was careful, right? Because I
Mhm.
did this for a long time, didn't get caught. I was careful. There was no stone left unturned of what needed to happen for me to get away with this. And I left the house and I went and hung out with my friends. We went over to my neighbor's house and then I was creeping back to the house and I started to walk down the driveway and the light in that room in my room was on and I was like, I'm pinched. Somebody went in my room and they know I'm not home and I'm jacked and this is
It's
the end of
over. It's over,
this is the end
Johnny.
of everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was so stressed. And I was so stressed that, and I thought, I was so convinced that I was busted that I didn't even climb back up the thing. I went straight through the front door. I used my key and I was like, well, it doesn't matter now if I wait, if the dogs bark or whatever, because I'm
I'm
screwed.
in
And
trouble.
yeah, so I went in the front door, closed the door, locked it, wasn't particularly trying to be quiet or anything because I thought I was going to go in my room. My mom was going to be like, ah, bah, bah. And instead I walked upstairs and my room was completely closed. Nothing had been disturbed whatsoever. Everything was just as I left it. No one was awake. Like the dogs were in my parents' bedroom with them. Nobody even stirred, nothing. And in the morning, I was waiting. I was like, okay, well, they did it, but then they got tired of waiting for me and they went back to sleep or whatever. Tomorrow, I'm going to get the hammer. I just knew it. Go downstairs, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. And that pocket door was open and that light was on. And I was like, all right, something's up because that nobody went in my room and that happened. And there's no way on earth I would leave that room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're
There's no
like,
way on
"Yeah, I,
earth.
I got to button this shit up before I get out of this house because I can't
Yeah.
get
I
busted."
would
Also,
never, I would never leave it like that.
the amount of dread you must have felt like as you were going to bed, right? Because you're like, I am so fucked. And in the
Yeah.
morning, I'm going to get it. And then you get up in the morning and it's like, all is well. And you're like, what? I don't understand what's happening. Okay, I guess I'm just haunted. Fine,
Yeah.
fine.
I was
Better than
like,
getting in trouble.
yeah. And everybody used to joke about the guy that died there and, oh, he died in your room, whatever. And I was like, and then I was like, thanks, man. I mean, I would much rather it be you than them.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe he was just kind of like leaving the light on for you, just so that you could, he was like actually trying to be helpful. He's like, he knew you were on your way. He turned the light on just to kind of welcome you home so you could see better when you're like climbing up and climbing in. So he was like looking out for you. I enjoy that version of the story. Yeah, much
I like that
better.
too.
Yeah, than him like creeping around and being a creepy creep or like some weirdo. Yeah, I don't like that, but yeah, taking
Yeah.
care of
No,
you,
I
looking
think
out for you.
nothing bad ever happened. So I think he was just like, well, it's really dark and they have to climb up that thing. Like,
Yeah,
let's leave the light on. It's
let's
fine.
leave the light on. I enjoy that. That's a good one. That's a good one. All right. One last thing to do here, and this is my in between the lines segment. This is where we perform a little bit of bibliomancy. And
Mhm.
bibliomancy is basically kind of like an oracle or tarot reading, but I do it with a couple of books. And we always have a choice with that. And the way that this works is that you are going to think of a question. And I always tell people, know that we're going to talk about the question. So maybe don't ask the deepest, darkest question in your soul, but you're going to hold that question in your mind. I'm going to pick a page and we're going to interpret, based on what we got. So I have two books. I've got my Floriography, which is my Victorian era flower book, because I am obsessed with the Victorian era. And then I have my ornithography, which is birds, and they are lovely as well. So which one would you prefer? We do flowers or we do birds?
Let's do flowers since I'm
Okay.
a big old plant daddy.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. I like it. Okay. So you're going to hold the question in your head and you let me know when you've got it, and I'm going to pick a page. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. We got the ivy. Now, I always read the meaning, we get into the interpretation. So, the meaning of ivy is fidelity and attachment. And the origin, this clinging leafy vine winds itself around ancient trees. Even after a tree dies, ivy remains attached, unable to be separated from its eternal embrace. Now, we always do the Victorian era interpretation of what to pair it with, because that's what they did. So you would pair it with a dahlia to honor a long lasting relationship. Hellebore, which I never know if I pronounce these things right, to say that nothing will ever come between you and your partner. Now, what was your question and what does this mean to you?
Well, that's so interesting. So my question was, is my borzoi going to come to me soon, which is the dog that I want? And so I've been calling in a dog for years, and I wanted to know if it was going to come to me like sooner rather than later.
Sounds like sooner to your
Mhm.
warm embrace.
Yeah,
Attachment. I love this for you.
yeah,
Oh, new doggies. Oh, they're the
yeah.
best. They're the best. Gray, this was so amazing. I'm so glad you're here. This is, I think, one of our my better interviews for listeners, because we just don't talk about this subject a lot. And I'm so grateful that you're here and sharing all of your wisdom and information with our listeners. Now, tell everybody where and how they can find you.
You can find me on my website, which is Grey Liefer, EOLD, which is end of life doula, .com, or askaenergetics.com, which is ASKA energetics. Um, and yeah, that's really the only place. I'm not on social media, and
Support that.
I'm primarily
Cosign.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm by referral only, and but you are welcome to email me through my website, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. It's usually not too long before I get back to folks, and yeah, I'm so grateful to be here. I love anytime people want to talk about this topic because it's so incredibly important. And I just don't think we can get enough of just open discussion around end of life, around dementia, and just our core needs that people are going to have moving into the next 20 years in this industrial medical complex that
Ugh.
we're not prepared for it.
Yeah, we need all the help that we can get. That is for
All the
sure.
help we can
All
get.
the help we can get.
Yep.
And listeners, I'm going to post all of that information in the show notes. So no need to memorize any of it. It will be there for you to read and click on if you would like to work with Grey. Grey, thank you so very much for being here. This was so much fun. And yes, safe travels. And I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you so much.
AGECRAFT After Dark is written, produced, and edited by me, Julia Granacki. Theme music Bernard Burnett by Ivy Virus. Have a question or a spooky story? I want to hear it. Leave me a message at speakpipe.com/agecraft, and you might just hear yourself on the show. For more AGECRAFT content, join me on Substack at agecraft.substack.com. If you'd like to work with me and learn more about all of the things, head to juliagwellness.com. Thanks for listening. Remember, visibility is activism. And until next time, stay curious, stay a little haunted, and I'll see you in the dark.